The sun rose gently over Lagos, casting warm hues across the city skyline. Mary stood outside the church, holding Andrew's hand. His eyes sparkled with renewed life, and a small smile played on his lips. It had been weeks since his miraculous recovery, and Mary was determined to start anew. "Mom, what's next?" Andrew asked, his voice filled with innocent curiosity. Mary looked down at him, her heart swelling with love. "We're going to find a new place to live, somewhere safe and filled with light," she replied, squeezing his hand gently. Peter approached them, his expression warm. "Mary, we've arranged temporary accommodation for you and Andrew," he said. "It's modest but comfortable." Mary's eyes welled up with gratitude. "Thank you, Peter. I don't know how to repay you." He shook his head. "No need for that. Just focus on rebuilding your lives. God will provide the rest." They moved into a small apartment provided by the church. It wasn't much, a simple 2-bedroom space with basic furnishings, but to Mary and Andrew, it was a sanctuary. The walls were painted a soothing shade of cream, and sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a hopeful glow. As days turned into weeks, Mary found a job at a local bakery, thanks to a recommendation from one of the church members. She enjoyed the work. The smell of freshly baked bread and pastries was therapeutic, and it kept her mind occupied. Andrew returned to school, where he was welcomed back by his classmates and teachers. He excelled in his studies, his previous ordeal seeming like a distant nightmare. Yet, sometimes, Mary caught a shadow flicker across his face, a fleeting reminder of the trauma he'd endured. One evening, as they sat together at the small kitchen table eating dinner, Andrew looked up thoughtfully. "Mom, do you think Dad will ever come back?" Mary paused, her fork hovering over her plate. The question she'd been dreading had finally surfaced. She took a deep breath. "I don't know, sweetheart," she admitted. "But no matter what happens, we have each other, and that's what's most important." Andrew nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I miss him sometimes," he whispered. "I know," Mary replied softly, reaching across the table to hold his hand. "I miss him too." Meanwhile, Michael was thousands of miles away in London. He'd fled Nigeria in a haze of confusion and fear, but as time passed, doubt gnawed at him. He sat alone in his small apartment, the bustling city outside contrasting sharply with the emptiness he felt inside. One night, scrolling through his emails, he noticed a message from an old friend, Tund, who still lived in Lagos. Curiosity piqued, he opened it. "Hey, Michael. I heard about what happened with Mary and Andrew. Man, I don't know all the details, but I think you should talk to Mary. There's been some incredible news about Andrew's recovery. People are calling it a miracle. I thought you'd want to know. Best, Tund." Michael's heart raced as he reread the email. A miracle? Andrew recovered? Guilt washed over him like a tidal wave. He'd abandoned his family when they needed him most, influenced by fear and his parents' words. Unable to ignore the urge any longer, he picked up the phone and dialed Mary's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. He tried again, but there was no answer. Determined, he decided to call his parents. "Hello," his mother answered hesitantly. "Mom, it's Michael." There was a long pause. "Michael, it's been a while." "Yes, it has," he replied, his voice strained. "I heard about Andrew, that he's recovered." His mother sighed. "Yes, by God's grace, he's well now." "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "We thought you didn't care," she said quietly. "You left without a word." Michael clenched his fist. "You and Dad told me to leave them. You said Mary was a witch, that she was behind everything." "We were only telling you what the pastor said," she defended. "And you believed him over your own daughter-in-law." Michael's voice cracked. "Over your grandson's mother?" There was silence on the other end. Finally, his mother spoke, her voice heavy with regret. "We were wrong, Michael. The pastor, he was exposed. Turns out he was a fraud, deceiving many families. He's been arrested." Michael's head spun. The foundation of lies he'd based his decisions on crumbled beneath him. "I need to make things right," he whispered. The next morning, Michael booked a flight back to Lagos. As the plane soared above the clouds, He rehearsed what he would say to Mary and Andrew. Fear and shame wrestled within him, but he knew he had to face them. Upon arriving, he went straight to his parents' house. They greeted him with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Son, we're glad you're home," his father said, avoiding eye contact. "I didn't come here to reconcile with you," Michael replied coldly. "I need to find Mary and Andrew. Do you know where they are?" His mother hesitated. "We heard they're staying near the church." Mary found a job at a bakery on Broad Street. Without another word, Michael left, leaving his parents standing in the doorway. He navigated the busy streets until he found the bakery. Through the window, he saw Mary arranging loaves of bread on a shelf. She looked tired but content, a soft smile playing on her lips as she interacted with customers. Gathering his courage, he entered the shop. The bell above the door chimed softly, and Mary looked up. Her eyes widened in shock as they locked with his. "Mary," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. She stood frozen for a moment before turning away. "What are you doing here, Michael?" she asked, her tone guarded. "I came to see you." "To apologize," he said, stepping closer. "I was wrong, Mary. I should never have left you. And Andrew." She busied herself behind the counter, avoiding his gaze. "It's a bit late for apologies, don't you think?" He swallowed hard. "I know I've hurt you beyond words. But please, give me a chance to make it right." Mary finally looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pain and resolve. "You abandoned us when we needed you most. Do you have any idea what we've been through?" "I can only imagine," he admitted. "But I want to be here for you now. For both of you." She shook her head. "Andrew doesn't need a father who runs at the first sign of trouble. We've moved on." Michael's heart sank. "Please, Mary. Let me at least see him." She sighed deeply. "He'll be out of school soon. You can talk to him then. But understand that this doesn't mean everything is forgiven." Later that afternoon, Mary brought Andrew to a nearby park. Michael waited anxiously by a bench, his palms sweaty. When he saw them approaching, his breath caught. Andrew looked healthy and happy, his laughter echoing as he ran ahead. "Dad." Andrew stopped short, his eyes widening in surprise. "Hey, buddy," Michael said softly, kneeling down to his son's level. Andrew stood still, uncertainty clouding his features. "You came back." "I did." "I'm so sorry for leaving," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "I made a terrible mistake." Andrew looked down, scuffing his shoe against the dirt. "Mom said you had to go away for a while." Michael glanced at Mary, who stood watching them with a guarded expression. "Yes, but I shouldn't have. Can you forgive me?" The boy considered this for a moment before nodding slowly. "I missed you, Dad." Relief washed over Michael, and he pulled Andrew into a gentle hug. "I missed you too, more than you know." As they sat together on the bench, Andrew began to chatter about school, his friends, and the games they'd play. Mary watched them from a distance, her arms crossed. Part of her was glad to see them reconnecting, but she couldn't ignore the hurt Michael had caused. When the sun began to set, she approached them. "It's time to go home, Andrew. Can Dad come with us?" Andrew asked eagerly. Mary hesitated, then met Michael's hopeful gaze. "Not tonight," she said firmly. "But maybe another time." Andrew's face fell slightly, but he nodded. "Okay." Michael stood up. "Thank you for letting me see him," he said to Mary. "I hope we can talk more soon." She gave a curt nod. "We'll see." Over the next few weeks, Michael persisted in his efforts to rebuild trust with Mary and Andrew. He visited the bakery regularly, sometimes buying bread just to have a reason to talk to her. Slowly, Mary's icy demeanor began to thaw. One evening, after closing up the shop, Mary found Michael waiting outside. "Walking home alone at this hour isn't safe," he said, falling into step beside her. "I've managed just fine," she replied, though not unkindly. They walked in silence for a while before Michael spoke again. "I want to explain what happened," he began. "Not to make excuses, but so you understand." Mary glanced at him. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "I was under a lot of pressure, financially, emotionally. My parents kept filling my head with lies about you, and I was weak enough to believe them. I was scared, and I took the coward's way out." She remained silent, so he continued. Leaving you was the worst mistake of my life. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. Mary stopped walking, turning to face him. You shattered our family, Michael. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight. I know, he said earnestly, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. She studied his face, searching for sincerity. Andrew needs stability. I won't let anyone hurt him again. I would never hurt him, Michael promised. You already did, she replied softly. They resumed walking, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Just as life seemed to be settling into a new normal, strange occurrences began to happen again. Andrew started waking up from nightmares, his sheets soaked with sweat. Mom, I saw it again, he whispered one morning, dark circles under his eyes. Saw what, honey? Mary asked gently. The ghost from before. It was in my room. Mary's heart skipped a beat. Are you sure? Maybe it was just a bad dream. He shook his head vigorously. No, it was real. Just like before. Fear gripped her. They were no longer in the haunted house. How could this be happening again? She decided to consult Peter. That afternoon, she visited the church and found Peter in his office. I need your help, she said urgently. Peter listened as she explained the situation. His brow furrowed in concern. This is troubling, he admitted. The spirit may have attached itself to Andrew. What can we do? Mary asked, desperation creeping into her voice. We'll need to hold special prayer sessions, he replied. And perhaps it would be wise to have Andrew stay here at the church for a few days. Mary agreed, anything to protect her son. When she told Michael about the situation, he was skeptical. Are you sure this isn't just a child's imagination? He questioned. Michael, after everything we've been through, how can you doubt this? She snapped. He raised his hands defensively. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure we're not overreacting. We can't take any chances, she insisted. Reluctantly, Michael agreed to support her decision. During one of the prayer sessions, as the group gathered around Andrew, a chilling wind swept through the church, extinguishing the candles. The room plunged into darkness, and a low, haunting laugh echoed around them. Peter's voice rose above the chaos. In the name of Jesus, we command you to reveal yourself. A shadowy figure materialized in the corner, its form shifting and indistinct. You cannot save him, it hissed. Mary clutched Andrew tightly, her heart pounding. Michael stood nearby, his eyes wide with disbelief. Who are you? Peter demanded. I am the one wronged, the spirit replied. Bound to this child until justice is served. Peter's eyes narrowed. What injustice binds you? The spirit's form flickered. I was betrayed, left to die in that house. My soul cannot rest. Mary stepped forward. What do you want from my son? Reparation, it whispered. A life for a life. That's not fair. Mary cried. Andrew did nothing to you. The spirit's gaze fixed on her. He lives where I perished. The sins of the past linger. Peter raised his hands. We can help you find peace. Tell us what happened. The spirit hesitated before speaking. I was a servant in that house, accused of a crime I did not commit. They locked me away, and I died alone. Michael's face paled. Is there any way to make amends? The spirit turned to him. Bring the truth to light. Only then can I rest. Determined to free their son from the spirit's grip, Mary and Michael delved into the history of the house. They visited archives, spoke to longtime residents, and pieced together the tragic story of a young woman named Aisha, who had worked as a maid in the house decades ago. Accused of stealing valuable jewelry, Aisha was locked in the basement by her employers and forgotten when the family abruptly left the country. She perished from starvation and neglect, her death unrecorded, and her body never found. We have to find her remains, Mary realized. Give her a proper burial. Michael agreed. It's the only way to bring her peace. They returned to the abandoned house, which had been sealed off since their departure. Breaking in, they made their way to the basement. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Using flashlights, they searched the dark space until Mary stumbled upon a small, concealed room. Inside, they found skeletal remains curled up in a corner. Tears welled in Mary's eyes. This must be Aisha. Michael swallowed hard. We need to report this to the authorities. They contacted the police, who handled the remains with care. A proper funeral was arranged, and Aisha was laid to rest in a quiet cemetery. Mary and Michael attended the service, offering prayers for her soul. That night, as Andrew slept at the church, the atmosphere was calm. No winds, no whispers. The next morning, he woke up smiling. "Mom, she's gone," he announced cheerfully when Mary arrived. Mary hugged him tightly. "That's wonderful news, sweetheart." Peter joined them, a satisfied smile on his face. "Her soul has found peace. You've done a good thing." Michael, standing nearby, felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "I'm glad we could help her." Mary turned to him, her eyes softening. "Thank you for doing this with me." He met her gaze. "We're a family. We should face things together." She nodded slowly. "Perhaps it's time we tried to rebuild that family." Over the following months, they worked on mending their relationship. Michael attended counseling to address his past decisions and the influence of his parents. He confronted them about their actions, establishing boundaries to protect his family. Mary gradually opened her heart to him again, seeing the genuine effort he was making. They decided to attend couples therapy to strengthen their bond. Andrew thrived, his laughter filling their home once more. The nightmares ceased, and he excelled in school and sports. The shadow that had loomed over their lives finally dissipated. One sunny afternoon, the family visited the park where Michael and Andrew had reconnected. As they picnicked under a large oak tree, Andrew ran around chasing butterflies. Michael took Mary's hand. "I know I can't erase the past, but I promise to be here for you and Andrew from now on." She smiled softly. "That's all I ask." They watched their son play, the future looking brighter than ever. "Maybe we can find a new place," Mary suggested. "Somewhere to make fresh memories." "I'd like that," Michael agreed. "But this time, we'll make sure it's the right home for us." She nodded. "No more secrets, no more rushing into things." "Agreed," he said, squeezing her hand. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, they packed up their things. Walking back home, they felt like a real family again, stronger for the trials they'd endured. Years later, Mary and Michael opened a community center dedicated to helping families in need. They offered support for those dealing with supernatural occurrences, mental health issues, and domestic challenges. Their story became a beacon of hope, showing that with faith, love, and perseverance, even the darkest situations could lead to light. Andrew often helped out after school, sharing his experiences to encourage other children facing hardships. One day, as they closed up the center, Andrew turned to his parents. "I'm proud of us," he said with a grin. Mary ruffled his hair. "So am I." Michael put his arm around them both. "We've come a long way." They stood together, watching the sunset, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it as a united front. If you enjoyed the part 2 of this story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories.